Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be doing a quick comparison of Intel's recently released i7-8086K versus their i7-8700K. Now before we get started, both these CPUs, as they are on the same socket, are used in the same motherboard, with the same graphics card, same system. The only difference is the CPU. And any results that have a 1 or 2 FPS difference, that can be counted towards frame variance, just because one test is different from the other test, if that makes sense. So basically, one test might be 2 FPS higher, even though it's the exact same CPU, just because the system was using one more resource than it was before, kind of thing. So if there are only 1 or 2 FPS differences, as I'll mention when we find those, if they do come up, that'll be counted towards frame variance and not actually any increase or decrease in performance. So let's have a quick look at the specifications. Both CPUs are 6-core 12-thread chip. The 8086 coming in at 629 Australian dollars, with the 8700K coming in at 500 Australian dollars. The 8086K has a base frequency of 4 GHz and it turbos to 5 GHz, whereas the 8700K has a base frequency of 3.7 GHz and a boost frequency of 4.7 GHz. Both have 12 megs of smart cache, a 95-watt TDP, include the same Intel UHD 630 integrated GPU. Both support up to 64 gigs of DDR4 at 2666 MHz in dual channel mode, and as I mentioned before, both are the same socket, LGA 1151. Now onto the first benchmark, we've got Blender 2.78. Now this is the time in seconds. I've included 2 Ryzen 7 chips just as a reference to see as well how they compare in the grand scale of things, but we'll be focusing obviously on the 2 i7s. So as we can see here, the 8086 pulls ahead by 9 points in this test, so we're getting a little bit better performance from the 8086K in this test. Then in Cinebench R15, this is the multi-core mode, we're actually getting a 42, had to work that out for a second, a 42 point increase with the 8700K over the 8086, which is interesting, even though the 8086 has that higher boost clock and base clock as well. So we'll continue on. The next test, we got Cinebench R15, and this is the single score mode. As we can see, we're getting a very similar score here, a difference of only 4 points, which can actually be discounted to frame variance between the two. So both CPUs again here are very, very similar, as we also see with the 2 Ryzen 7s actually as well. However, both these i7s beat out both the Ryzen 7 2700 and the Ryzen 7 1800X. Moving on to Handbrake, encoding a 4K video. Now this is frames per second. As we can see, both CPUs again are getting a very, very, very similar score, with the 8086K coming in at 33.5 points and the 8700K coming in at 34 points. Again, both these i7s beating out the 2 Ryzen 7s, which were both at 26 points and 27 points. On to the next test. We're moving into our games now. I'm going to disregard the Ryzen CPUs in these games tests because they don't actually matter. Now we've got Civilization 6 here running at 4K on the Ultra preset. Both CPUs got the 112 mark. Now I believe on the 8700K it was 111.5 or 111.7 or something like that, but I rounded it up because again that comes down to frame variance. So these two CPUs are getting the same kind of score on Civilization 6 and 4K. Then with Rise of the Tomb Raider, this is running at 1080p on the Ultra preset. Again, there's a 1 FPS difference between these two CPUs, which can be discounted to frame variance, with the 8086K coming in at 112 points and the 8700K coming in at 111 points. Now the final game we're having a look at is Rocket League. This is at 1080p on the Ultra preset as well, and now there's a 2 FPS difference here, which again, as most of these benchmarks have been, comes down to a frame variance basically. 8700K is getting 262 FPS, with the 8086K getting 264, so that's a difference of 2 points between the two CPUs. Now in conclusion, as we mentioned before, there's a $130 price difference between these two CPUs, which kind of seems a bit strange because they're actually the exact same CPU. Basically the 8086K is just better bin chips, and so because of that, the performance is the exact same, if not slightly worse in some cases actually, than the cheaper 8700K, which is interesting. Now that Intel's big advertising scheme for this 8086K is that it's running at 5 GHz. Now this is actually a little bit misleading because it's only turboing to 5 GHz on one single core. Now that's how Intel Turbo Boost works, but the way Intel have been advertising it is trying to say that the CPU is a 5 GHz CPU, which in essentially it is, but it's only on a single core. And as we saw from all of our benchmarks and games, that makes virtually no difference at all to the i7-8700K, which can actually be overclocked well beyond 5 GHz if you have a good motherboard and good cooling solution along with good RAM, which would be definitely easily possible if, say for example, you got the 8700K instead. You would save $130, which could then go towards a better motherboard, better RAM, better cooling and that kind of thing, which means you could push your 8700K even higher to get even better scores than that. So at the end of the day, the i7-8086K is not worth it. Sure, it's a nice CPU, it's got a good marketing point, it can turbo to 5 GHz on one core out of the box, which is certainly pretty cool. It's limited edition, which is also pretty cool, but it's already just a marketing scam. The whole limited edition brand and logo that they put on it, the whole 5 GHz marketing point, it's not actually worth anything in the real world. It's not worth $130 more than the 8700K. It's probably not even worth the same price because the 8700K actually beats it in some circumstances. But anyway guys, thank you for watching. I know this was a short video, but I thought I'd do it because it's something that people might be interested in. Let me know if you'd be interested in these kind of videos again in the future. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.